Order. I'll call Esther McVeigh to move the motion, and then I'll call the Minister to respond. Esther McVeigh.
Thank you, Mrs Llewellyn-Buck. I beg to move that this House considers fly tipping in Tatton. It is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today, and I'm grateful of this opportunity to talk about this matter. Now, Madam Chair, hardly a week goes by without someone contacting my office about the scourge of fly tipping, and I'm sure that is an experience shared by many members across the House. If you don't mind me saying, the name fly tipping belies the seriousness of the issue. It is, in reality, a grave matter. Someone dumping their waste on someone else's land. Waste that person hasn't bothered to properly dispose of, and so what they think they'll do is dump it on somebody else's land. And the problems it causes cannot be underestimated. Today, I want to focus my remarks on the impact it causes on local communities and consider what practical measures can be taken to ensure this problem does not continue to grow. Now, this is not a new problem. Flying tipping has plagued communities for years, yet this is a problem that is growing. And in 2023-24, local authorities in England reported 1.15 million fly tipping incidents, a 6% increase from the previous year. And what I'm hearing, this is rising even further. Members in this House will be aware that under current provisions, small-scale fly tipping on public land is the responsibility of local authorities. Larger-scale fly tipping falls under the responsibility of the Environment Agency, and on private land, it generally falls to the responsibility of that landowner to remove somebody else's waste. Statistics from the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs shows that in 23-24, the most common size category for fly tipping incidents was equivalent to a small van load, making up 31% of incidents, followed by the equivalent of a car boot or less, which accounted for 28%. Now, whether it's beside a road, it's in a car park, on a public footpath or open fields, we have all seen it, and I share the frustration and upset felt by residents because of the impact that dumping of rubbish, no matter how big or how small, has on their communities. And fly tipping is rising across Tatton, from household rubbish to dump tyres on Crowder's Lane in Latchdennis, to waste on the side of the A556 at Lostock Raylham towards Plumley, to household items such as mattresses on Holmes Chapel Road, Allostock, to waste dumped in the woodlands of Broad Lane, Sproston, to the Sainsbury's car park in Wilmslow, and on the Marston Playground, and that list is growing. Now, the process to report fly tipping to local councils is unnecessarily difficult, requiring excessive back and forth of communication. For example, when I reported fly tipping incident on School Lane, Pickmere, late last year, it turned out to be a veritable ping-pong of emails between department and then a trawl of website pages just to report the incident. Only last month, I met with residents from Cultural Farm in Wilmslow who lamented the whole process. And for them, they are now seeing an increase on fly tipping, and it's now become a regular occurrence, and they're having to use this system all the time. These people, who are proud of their local community, do want to keep their community tidy. They want to be proud in the local community, but they're having these thoughtless, reckless people dump their rubbish in their area. I will indeed give way.
Can I commend everybody for bringing this forward? It's absolutely right to highlight the issue for our Tatton constituency, but for my constituency it's similar. One of the ideas mooted back home, Madam Chair, in Northern Ireland is for CCTV to be put in place where there is habitual fly tipping, and one of the requests was that the government back home and the PSNI and the local PSCPs would also take it upon themselves to make money available for CCTV. Does and would the Honourable Lady feel that may be a possibility of how to catch those who are doing it regularly?
I want to thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention, because I think that could well be a solution, at least part of the solution here today. I mean, this is something that does impact members from across the House, and I know the Minister will have some thoughtful responses, and I do think that the Minister will take that into consideration. But I think we need to use all tools at our disposal to stop fly tipping, because I know my residents are gravely upset about what goes on, because sometimes no sooner have they cleared up the mess, it is back and it keeps reappearing. Residents of Shaw Farm raised the matter with me that things that add to the problem is how the local council, particularly of late, is not maintaining the area. So grass is not being cut, verges are becoming overgrown, and street lights that have become broken are not being mended, which can make matters worse, because that can attract people to the area thinking they can tip under the cover of darkness, or think they can hide their rubbish in overgrown grass or bushes. And all of this needs to be resolved, and we don't need to give people the ability to tip by darkness and tip into overgrown areas. Mrs Llewellyn-Buck, repairing street lights and cutting grass and hedges are not complex matters to solve. This is something I think that we all could make sure is resolved. The Countryside Alliance suggested in their 2023 Rural Crime Survey that 35% of those surveyed had experienced some sort of crime within the past year, and that top reported rural crime was fly tipping at 37%. Residents tell me fly tipping is not pursued, even when there is photographic evidence, even often with proof of the culprit, the people who've done it. And this does correspond with the latest figures, that data for 2022-23 showed only 110 people received a fine for over £1,000, while more than 50% of the fines were between £200 to £500. So, Madam Chair, tougher action needs to be taken. Police need to investigate these incidents, and there needs to be tougher penalties. Because if perpetrators think they can get away with it, if they think they're not going to be investigated, if they think it's not going to be taken seriously, and if the penalties aren't high enough, they will be doing the calculation for themselves that they think it is easier, therefore, to dump this waste rather than to dispose of it properly. So in my view, these fines do not go far enough. They need to be higher and more severe. In the last Parliament, the previous government announced some sensible policies to deal with this matter, not least to introduce points on an individual's driving licence if found guilty of this crime. So can I ask the Minister, in a spirit of being constructive, maybe to revisit some of those suggestions and see if agreement can be found to further this policy, which I feel could act as a deterrent. And even if it's a small deterrent, I don't think there will be a silver bullet, but I think a combination of different deterrents might work. Now, adding to this problem, what is becoming painfully clear, even in local councils, even if local councils cannot see it, is the limit that is now being put on council waste sites, is more limits that are being put on bin collection services and new costs for bin collection. So, for example, in Cheshire East, the council have recently taken the disastrous decisions to close waste centres, reduce bin collections, and require an additional payment for green bin collections. And if there's no tip left in your area, residents, and if a tip is left in your area, residents now need to book at the weekend or book on a bank holiday to visit that tip, which again It's just a barrier to doing the right thing if you have to go through all these hurdles to try and dispose of your rubbish properly. And starting next year, bin collections will now change from fortnightly to 3 weekly, and as well as the council charging for green bins. Now in Knutsford, since changing the green bin collection, we're definitely seeing more and more garden waste being dumped. And one resident said to me it's because they think people can't afford this green bin charge, and they've called it locally the green bin tax. On top of that, in Cheshire West and Chester Council launched a consultation in July on its proposals to change the way waste disposal is managed. Among the proposals is a change to limit the amount of DIY waste that can be brought to tips without charge, and a pre-registration of vehicles arriving at the tip. Councils are saying that they are closing their tips and reducing the access to waste collection because it will save them money. And Cheshire West say changes will help them reach their climate goals. But in reality, local authorities have spent an estimated £64 million in 2023 clearing up fly-tipped waste from public areas, an enormous burden on the public purse. These measures are more likely to act as a catalyst for fly tippers, and any savings that they've got from, the cost of green bins and cutting and closing down tips are likely to be eaten away by the cost of fly tipping. Once again, there, I do believe, is a lack of foresight. Now, the latest available data shows there were 4,108 incidents of fly tipping reported in Cheshire East. That's 79 a week. Residents cannot afford for this number to keep growing. What is needed is better financial management and a deeper understanding of how to prevent this issue. Fly tipping is not a victimless crime. The victims are the landowners, the local communities and taxpayers who are left to shoulder the cost. Because if you dump on private land, it is the private owner who has to clear that up too. What we need is a joined-up approach, one that aligns government policy with councils. We need consistent enforcement measures and deterrence for potential offenders. We cannot continue to pay the price for other people deliberately leaving their rubbish on somebody else's land. It's not just the cost to remove the rubbish. Dumping waste also presents a risk to public health. Some people don't know actually what has been dumped. It can be toxic waste, and if it is left there for some time, it will attract vermin. One further point I'd like to add is the concerning increase on levels of large-scale commercial tipping on our farmlands and in our countryside. And this is now growing to alarming scales. I don't know why people are doing it. I don't know the root causes. I'm not saying it's an escalation of fly tipping. We're seeing an escalation of fly tipping on its size and on its regularity. But this is where people are buying land in the countryside under the guise of doing something else, and they are opening illegally tips as if they were commercial tips, charging people to bring in their rubbish and dump it on agricultural land. Now, this will be toxic waste, waste that should have been disposed of elsewhere, would have been much more expensive, but they're not. They're dumping it now on our rural land, and this is not being taken seriously enough, and this is a major problem, and it is a problem now arising in Tatton, in Highley, in Mobley, in Sproston and Little Lee. And this, I would like the Minister, if she can't mention it today, do think about what we can do to stop this. All types of tipping, fly tipping, and this is serious criminal activity. We must break the pattern of crime. to ensure the environment and local residents are protected, and we must improve access to our tips and our local amenities, open up those opening hours, enable people to get rid of their waste. So my questions for the Minister are, what steps can the government take to ensure that the police force, the councils and the environment agencies work together and escalate this crime to the level of seriousness and the level of importance that it deserves, so that we can work actively to rectify the issue and clear up the mess and bring the perpetrators to justice? Will the Minister consider, number two, will the Minister consider implementing a national strategy on waste disposal, ensuring that tips remain open and accessible and that bin collections are regular to prevent councils from reducing access to these services? And what actions can the government take to tackle large-scale commercial fly tipping, particularly when it is linked to organised crime?
Question is that this House has considered the matter of fly tipping in Tatton. Minister.
Thank you very much indeed, Mrs Llewellyn-Buck, and what a pleasure it is to serve, I think, for the first time under your chairship today. I'd like to begin by congratulating the Right Honourable Lady for Tatton on securing today's debate, and I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for Strangford for his intervention. Fly tipping is not just a load of rubbish. It is serious environmental crime, and as she has set out, it blights communities, the environment, it harms wildlife, and it can create a feeling of people not feeling safe where they live. And we completely appreciate the difficulty that it poses to councils, to farmers and landowners, and to private businesses such as the Sainsbury's, whose car park she was discussing in her speech. Local councils reported over 1 million fly tipping incidents in 2023-24, and this is a significant cost burden to the economy. Over the last 5 years, these incidents have increased by 20%, so something is going wrong. It is completely unacceptable, and this government is very serious about taking back controls of our streets and our countryside. We have committed to forcing fly tippers and vandals to clean up the mess that they have created as part of a crackdown on antisocial behaviour, and I look forward to providing further details on this commitment in due course. And I will take on board the point that she raises about the previous government looking at points on driving licences and see where the DEFRA machine got to with that. But we do recognise the role that councils have in tackling fly tipping. It can happen for a variety of reasons. People trying to do the right thing with their waste and handing it over inadvertently to hardened criminals who are seeking to make money from the coordinated dumping of large amounts of waste. So, of course, the response has to be appropriate to the circumstances. But, of course, we want to see an effective enforcement strategy at the heart of local authority efforts to combat fly tipping. And I do encourage all councils to make good use of their powers, which include prosecution. Prosecution, as she says, can lead to significant fines, a community sentence, or even imprisonment and compensation for a landowner's clearance costs. So they can also be secured through the courts. While sentencing is a matter for the courts, I understand the National Fly Tipping Prevention Group, chaired by DEFRA officials, have previously produced guidance to support councils present robust cases to court. And Cheshire East is not currently a member of that National Fly Tipping group. And I do encourage they and any other councils who wish to join to crowd in any good work that they might be doing. Instead of prosecuting, local authorities can issue fixed penalty notices of up to £1,000 or £600 to those who pass their household waste to someone without the proper licence. They also have powers to stop, search and seize the vehicles of suspected fly tippers. And to help councils make full and proper use of their enforcement powers, we are seeking powers in the Crime and Policing Bill to provide statutory enforcement guidance, which councils will need to have regard to. So it's a much more directional approach. We need to get a grip on this, and as she says, this is an issue that affects both rural and inner city areas. We know in rural areas over 80% of farmers have said they've been affected by fly tipping on their land. We continue to work with the National Farmers Union and others through our fly tipping prevention group to promote and disseminate good practice on how to prevent fly tipping on private land. And I've visited Water Lane in Lichfield, where, exactly as she described, an entire van load was just emptied one night. They knew the other road was closed, they knew there'd be no passers-by, no CCTV, just dumped in the middle of the road, trapping people in their houses for a couple of days until the waste was shifted. And I met with the people and heard about the anxiety they had about what would we do in a medical emergency, how do the kids get to school. Absolutely dreadful. What I was curious about was this was not seen as a nationally significant incident. This was a local authority incident. So it's provoked a series of questions in my mind about what is a significant incident. We had a very good debate on fly tipping last week at DEFRA Orals, and I'm sorry she wasn't able to join us for that, but we did hear about a series of excellent pieces of work going on in Luton Council, where they've had 32 prosecutions, in Wolverhampton Council, where they use store cards. So if you spot a fly tipper, or you know somebody is doing something and you report it to the council, you're rewarded with a gift voucher, essentially. So some quite innovative work going on there. And Stoke-on-Trent Council, a newly elected Labour council, who has put this right at the top of their agenda. They've had out of 5,000 fly tipping incidents, they carried out 4,800 enforcement notices and 1,974 fixed penalty notices and 9 prosecutions. So a kind of zero tolerance approach. Of course, does this mean it goes away? No, often it can mean it goes somewhere else, but it's a kind of zero tolerance approach actually in Stoke-on-Trent is delivering some really interesting wins. And I can't remember which, I think one of them is using drones as well. So buzzing up it, because if you think you're being watched, the incentive, the disincentive is massive. So there's lots of new innovation that's going on. And I think nobody has a monopoly on wisdom on this. The public also have a role to play because approximately 60% of fly tips involve household waste. We know where it happens, along the flanked walls at the end of terraces. I was out canvassing in Foleshill and literally someone was about to do some fly tipping. And the householder that I was talking to spotted it, came out, and the guy got back in his van, broad daylight, in the middle of Coventry. Householders should check the register of waste carriers to avoid giving their waste to environmental criminals who promise quick, cheap waste collection, but then who go on to dump it in our communities. And I would just say, in Cheshire East, it is in the top 25% of local authorities in its 2022-23 recycling statistics. It's at 52%. There are fresh statistics which are going to be published tomorrow. But they are in the top quartile of local authorities in terms of people's recycling rates. So it's clear that it is the community locally does really want to do the right thing. She talked about waste carriers, and I think this is a massive weakness. The previous her government left a system that frankly was not fit for purpose. It's essentially paper-based. So I've asked officials to look at how we can strengthen the current waste carrier brokers and dealers regulatory regime to crack down on these waste criminals. And I will be saying something about that hopefully very shortly. And not today, but very soon. She raises the issues about householders getting rid of their rubbish. I sort of don't really like the word rubbish. I feel like it's materials, because everything has a purpose. If we can repair it, we can reuse it, we can pass it on to friends and families. That's much better than simply giving it to the tip and saying, over to you, work out which waste stream it goes into. DEFRA recently published guidance to ensure local authorities consider certain factors when they review the frequency of residual waste collections to ensure that reasonable standards are maintained. And part of that is to ensure that there is no increase in fly tipping. So we expect local authorities to monitor any changes to collection frequencies to ensure that there are no adverse consequences. So I do hope that reassures her that that will be being done. We also recognise the importance of household waste recycling centres, and this is obviously down to each individual local authority about the operation and the management of these in their areas. Previous research found that a link between fly tipping and booking systems cannot be ruled out. However, there appears to be no indication that such a link exists based on recent data. So some really interesting behaviour change things going on here, that perhaps in the past, if you had to book, it made life more difficult. Perhaps as we all get a bit more digitally savvy, that actually people are getting used to this new way of doing it. So there's conflicting research there, but we will keep an eye on what we're hearing and whatever research we have on the ground. On garden waste, it's down to councils to decide if they will continue to charge for the collection of this waste. So look, we need to work together to tackle this. It's Keep Britain Tidy's Great British Spring Clean campaign. Mrs Lewis, I'm sure we'll all be out, as I will be, at a litter pick. I'll be in Camden next week. Cleaning up Camden, and I'll be out in Coventry this weekend tackling the waste one bin bag at a time. We're also working with the National Fly Tipping Prevention Group, which includes councils, Environment Agency and police, to look at these innovative new ways of tackling fly tipping. In Coventry, we have a Facebook wall of shame, which is the CCTV footage which has been installed. Can see the Honourable Member for Strangford is thinking about how this can be used, which basically says, does anyone know these criminals? Pass them on, pass them on. And of course, reducing waste in the first place should mean there's less of it to be dumped unlawfully. We have our Circular Economy Task Force of experts from industry, academia, civil society and beyond to help us develop a circular economy strategy for England. And we're going to have a series of roadmaps of the interventions that the government and others will make to support economic growth as part of our plan for change, to tackle the threats to our environment and circularity, such as we see with fly tipping. And she is right to say that there are serious organised crime groups involved with this, who are taking money at the top end and charging full price, and then changing the nature of it and perhaps not, and pocketing the fees. So there's an awful lot of organised crime going on with that, and I am having weekly updates from the Environment Agency about enforcement and what steps we are taking to tackle serious organised crime. So we know that what gets tipped is often landfilled rather than recycled, refactored or repurposed. So just to conclude, wherever you live, town, country, city, village, you should be able to walk through your streets, including in Parliament. I saw a Costa coffee cup just sort of dumped by one of our carriage gates the other day, which deeply annoyed me. You should be able to feel proud of your environment. That's why we're committed to stamping out this antisocial behaviour, like fly tipping, from streets and our countryside. It's time to dump the excuses. Working with councils, regulators and others, we will force the offenders to clean up the mess. We will tighten the systems to put a stop to the waste criminals, and together to keep our communities clean.
The question is that this House has considered the matter of fly tipping in Tatton. As many are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Order, order. Sitting suspended till 16:30.